Why do you say that, Father? You aren't afraid, are you?
No, but I respect some of the superstitions of others. Often they are founded in fact.
This is your time. This is your call to arms. For the Cryptid Connection is your voice. I'm your host, Jennifer.
And I'm your host, Stephen. Welcome to Cryptid Connection.
The Cryptid Connection podcast is brought to you by CryptidConnection.com, a website dedicated to you, one who has interest in all things cryptid and paranormal. CC is a place where you can enjoy a hassle-free lifestyle and community of Bigfoot pursuit. All our podcast guests are members of the website. Stop by via the internet and visit. Guarantee you will start to feel at home. CryptidConnection.com.
Are you ready? Are you ready to try? In a holy Mount Zion, you got to make your decisions, but don't wait too long.
Hi, everybody. With this episode, we've got Chris Holm. Chris Holm has a podcast called Conspire Theory, and he has kind of been a layman paranormal researcher and actually gets into several different subjects. This will be a bit of a change in our show's usual format because up to this point, we've primarily been focusing on cryptids, and tonight we're going to spread our wings a little bit and get into the paranormal and maybe even UFO, things like that. So, everybody, say hi to Chris. How you doing, Chris?
Hey,
Hello,
kids. How's
Chris.
it going?
Oh, kids is appropriate tonight, let me tell you. Chris, a lot of people around here probably won't know you because right now I think our listeners are mostly still in the cryptid arena. So can you go through and tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and interests?
Well, the more we talk, we'll probably find out. I know quite a bit about them. Several of your past guests have been on my show prior to appearing on yours. So I would have to say is that I'm pretty much familiar. I know that in the thing, I'm a bit of a new voice. I've sort of gotten into podcasting for a little over a year now, but I've been listening avidly to podcasts for maybe about a good 2 or 3 years. And I just sunk into it, dived into it hard. And I went from, listening as a spectator and then with the podcast, I just wanted so much to jump into it and sort of like have a bit of a voice in the community and have a say and have interesting conversations. I remember one time I was having every single time I would go to a paranormal convention, I would run into Ken Gerhardt. He was a local cryptozoologist, and me and him would have some of the most fascinating conversations. And I was thinking sometime, man, I got to get these on tape sometime because we talk about such interesting topics. And I very rarely get to talk about the paranormal with people that are interested in it, because a lot of my background is, stuff in like fandom, like comic books and cosplay and anime and stuff like that, which you think would open it up to paranormal conversations, but not as much as I would like. So I decided then to, start my own podcast and talk to a lot of degree of guests. Like I run into such interesting fellows such as Chris James and Jeff Crypto Hulk Stewart. Me and him, our conversation was pretty interesting. We would butt heads a couple of times, and we'd talk about a bunch of different subjects. And I really get along good with him. He's good people, and it's like a continuous growing thing. And of course, every now and then you have a little bit of drama here and there, which is just, kind of silly. But being a veteran of drama culture from my fandom background, such as, you know, cosplay, furry, and anime and all that stuff. It's like I've sort of been there, done that, and in a way seen it here. It doesn't surprise me, but it is a bit disappointing.
Yes.
You're doing so much better than me, because I'll tell you what, I've been in the Squatch community for years, and I still can't deal with the drama. I wish it starts getting drama, and I just want to sit there and
he hides under
someone.
his shell, or he gets very upset. Can you tell us what your podcast is named, and where can we find it?
It's Conspire a Theory. You go to podomatic.com/Conspire a Theory, and then you will find it there. And if you can't remember that, just go ahead and Google it on any search engine, and it should be able to find you there. It'll show up on many of the networks out there. It's very easy to find.
And how do you pick your topics? Do you put them all in a hat and pick one out every week, or?
Well, when I first started the show in my first year, I was just mostly picking topics and building content, and usually I would just rely on either what friends were within arm distance that I could grab to talk about these topics. I was lucky enough that as I would go out to a lot of these paranormal conventions and events, I would run into new and interesting people. And a lot of them were very open and very, willing to come and talk to me, even though I'm really not bringing them any kind of clout whatsoever. I'm surprised that I run into people such as Jeff Crypto Hulk Stewart. I think I tripped over him at a convention, and he's been like he's been a remarkable person to speak to, as is Chris James and very other people in the industry, as well as different fields as well. When I try to go into paranormal stuff, I try to keep myself open, because I know that there is a distinct skeptic versus woo mentality that pretty much polarizes nearly every subcategory of paranormal research. From the cryptos, we got the flesh and bone, or flesh and blood, from the woo factor and such like that. And I try to keep an open mind, because I want to talk to people and understand where they're coming from, and I'm more willing and open to talking to more maybe off the wall and fringe topics. So I'm open to anything so long as the story is good. But I do know that I have to be wary that there are some characters out there that are just quite unscrupulous.
Mm-hmm. We are open here. We like to investigate all realms of the theory and possibilities, just to let people have a platform to speak. That brought me to a question, what you had just mentioned. You mentioned flesh and blood versus the woo factor. And I'm not as knowledgeable in the field of ufology as I should be. Is there a flesh and blood versus woo factor in ufology?
In ufology, yes. I skirt ufology. What I really am interested in, and what draws me out more, is things such as alien abduction and nighttime visitors and stuff of that nature, like shadow people, black-eyed kids, and all that stuff. What I find is there is that sort of hard science versus more fantastical explanations. In ufology, we have the thing called nuts and bolts versus, of course, woo. And in some cases, I think ultra-terrestrial, I think it's ETH versus UTH, which is, extraterrestrial hypothesis, which is the idea that aliens come from outer space. They travel here across time and space, and come in here and do their business. Or the UTH, which is the ultra-terrestrial hypothesis. That's the one where they come in from separate dimensions, which are, parallel to our own in some sort of high science way. I don't know exactly if there's a divide there, but sometimes it appears to be. And that's one that sort of, boggles my mind as well, because they're I would pretty much, consider them, cousins of the same theory that whatever the phenomenon is, that it's coming from some external, not local thing. And it's sort of like the where they come from type of thing that that, I guess confuses a lot of people. And oftentimes whenever I'm talking about something, like I won't try to put on the label of aliens or extraterrestrials or shadow people. Like specifically, I'll often refer to the subject as the phenomenon. Oh. And then when it comes to history and stuff itself, I'll refer to it as lore, as far as what the records and accounts are. And I've noticed a few patterns here and there. Like, say, for example, in the abduction phenomena, I have noticed that there is this pattern where it seems to be, as far as the more prominent stories that come forward are the ones about, it seems like the more and more we hear about the phenomenon, the less and less sort of like interesting it gets. It gets less and less diverse. And also the more and more we learn about our world, the further and further away the entities or alien phenomena comes from. Before, and they were flat out telling us, oh, we're from this star, oh, we're from Mars, we're from Venus, we're from here. And then it's like, now it's like, oh, we're from the dimension over. And then I've noticed with the alien abduction phenomenon, the captors or the entities themselves, they were very diverse. They were, machines. They were, I guess 7 foot tall, cucumber looking men with lobster claws and stuff like that. They're very, sci-fi type of thing. And now they're sort of dwindling down and they're becoming like, only so many like mantises and grays and reptilians and stuff like that. And I have to wonder, if is that our prominent pop culture influencing it, which is another debate altogether.
That's a very interesting debate, I'm sure.
Tell me something. You just mentioned those various races and everything. Are the Nordics still reported as well?
As far as I can tell, they very much are.
Okay.
I've run into a few. I do reach out and try to find. I'm trying to get more. As the show grows, I am getting more people coming forward, and I'm able to find more people that I can talk to. And a couple of the contactees that I do talk to that are willing to come onto the show, when I can arrange them, a lot of them also run into a lot of Nordic types as well. And that's really interesting.
All right. Now, I got a question for you here. And I apologize because it's probably wrapping around a little bit back to the beginning of your statements there. But it just, you had said something and it just popped on, and I wanted to know your opinion of it if you were familiar with it. Have you ever heard of the trickster? I guess the trickster theory, and what's your thought on that?
Oh, the trickster element. That's my favorite, my absolute favorite. Because, well, the thing is, oftentimes when we run into a wall in the research, a lot of other researchers and other podcast hosts and stuff, whenever they run into a bit of a wall, like the usual factor where woo tends to, uninvitedly, comes into the flesh and blood camp. Like, say, for example, people will follow a set of footprints and then they'll go into an open field and then it's just the footprints end. There's no way for them to go on. And that's sort of where, where we think we get close to an answer. And then there's like a sort of, we're tripped up somehow. And then that is often accredited to the trickster element, that the sort of will get so close, but never really find an answer. And of course, whenever I hear people say the trickster element, my mind, from my anime background, immediately goes to the anime fox girls with the large breasts and nine tails and stuff just bouncing around and stuff. That's what I think. That's what pops into my head. But then that's because, I come from a background of cartoons and comic books. But in some cases, I can understand that it is a frustrating element, and I think it's becoming more and more accepted. And some might say, well, that's just an excuse to come up with when the research ends up, hitting a dead end, which I can understand that criticism. But it's just part of, as far as we can tell, maybe it's part of the pattern that we haven't taken account of yet, or it's just par for the course. We we really need to do more research and find out more. It's for most people, it's a sign of frustration, and that's totally understandable.
Yeah, I can see that. That was totally a lucky break that I asked you about that, and you actually were really knowledgeable, because I was concerned that I was going to throw something out there that, because a lot of people I've talked to haven't been familiar with it, and so I'm really glad to know that you were.
I got educated tonight.
Oh, there you go.
I hadn't heard of it before.
That
cool.
is scary, because I'm gonna plug another podcast here, but you listen to it all the time, and that's Paracast.
Yes.
And Paracast, at least used to, with Christopher O'Brien, they would talk about the trickster element all the time. And that's where I had learned about it. And so, but anyway, you bring up the fact that these things tends to cross domains. We like, and I freely admit that I'm very guilty of this myself. I like my Bigfoot to be tall, furry, and bleeds. I just can't help that.
You paint yourself in a corner.
I do. It's, to me, I admit I'm a flesh and blood person. However, you are right. The phenomena goes far beyond that. Mm-hmm. And, it goes in, it's just like what we say, we call it the woo, but
it's stuff we don't understand.
Well,
or are unable to scientifically.
I think it's different. We have to maybe better categorize the woo. Because a lot of people, myself included, I will just sit there and think that the woo is anything that is outside of normal established science.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes stuff just gets out from under us, and we don't know how. And I can understand where that sort of fits in, because it's like, I know in some people they often refer to it as just, explaining a mystery with another mystery. And in some cases, it depends on a case by case basis. In some cases it may be valid and in others not. But it's one of those things that, as much as I'd hate to say it, it's a thing where we just have to keep looking and keep researching.
Exactly.
Type of a thing. But having a theory or not, I kind of, whatever possibility it is, I'm totally open to. I would love to, go to a zoo and see a Sasquatch on display. I would love to see what a gray looks like, in
right.
person. Although, I know it would probably scare the crap out of me, because I hear those things can read minds, and I don't want him going into my brain and, in my head, because those aren't for him. He doesn't have access to those. So it's just this sort of thing where, we want so much for it to be put on a silver platter for us, and we go out there to try to catch it in its natural element. And so far it's been a very frustrating thing, because it seems as though it's always 1, 2, 3 steps ahead of us in some sort of way or manner. Even Jeff Stewart, who I keep bringing up, he was, when he was on I think it was Finding Bigfoot or one of the shows, he would like try to set up, not traps, but sort of catches in a way to collect evidence. He would try to have something for, Sasquatches to brush up against, to collect physical evidence, because capturing one in the flesh, so to speak, was dang near impossible. And I don't want to sound like I'm putting words in his mouth, because it's sort of, that's just what I've heard, in interviews with him.
Where do you think, well, first off, let me ask you this. And we're not talking just Bigfoot here. We're not talking, I'm going to say cryptids in general. Where do you feel, is there a dividing line between cryptids and paranormal to you? Or do they all actually fit in kind of the same category?
Blend. Yeah.
Is there a scale? Because we mentioned the flesh and blood, and we have the woo, and most people it's left and right on a gray scale. One's black, one's white.
But there are a few that are.
Yeah. Is there a scale for you, I guess, first off? Or do you think they're all more homogeneously whole event, that it's all somehow interrelated. And I guess you could also throw, to an extent, you could throw the UFO and all of that. Is this all actually one big thing, or do you think we're actually dealing with separate phenomena?
Yeah, I've heard, I guess, what is often referred to as it's the unification theory, and then there's another one called the co-creation theory. And I think those kind of have some sort of steps in to fill in the blanks in a sort of way. Like a lot of people out there, they're encountering, physical phenomena. Their car runs across and it'll often, bump up against something. Now, as far as what it is, oftentimes is that an extension of ourselves? Is there actually physically something out there? And then in a ways our preconceptions, it sort of wears that like a mask. I've heard that often thrown on. I think it was a book referred to as The Messengers, where a lot of there's this phenomenon called screen memory, where whenever entities of any kind would often encounter people, they would do this thing where they would like slap a screen memory over it. So instead of seeing, a gray there in the bedroom, instead they see a large owl in their window or something like that, and that's to, I guess, for whatever it is to cover up the tracks. Now, as far as Bigfoot and cryptids and stuff like that, that's a very hard sell for that, because then we have these, what are supposedly large and lumbering creatures that are, very powerful, very ongoing. And one of my favorite cryptids, of course, is the Dogman. I love the Dogman. As far as from what I've seen, most of the evidence is largely anecdotal, and I haven't seen very satisfactory stuff of that, but I still hold out hope for that, for because that's just one of my favorites. But as far as, there is this other thing called the thought form projection, which was the topo, which used to be a big thing years ago. And that sort of is coming in and out and going in and out of vogue. But as far as, people are encountering something, and a lot of people would often see things, and then they would, human memory is very faulty. It's sort of like I don't want to say like you, oftentimes people will say, I know what I saw, but in some cases, when it comes to recalling events, our mind is sort of constantly buffering like a really slow computer when it comes to unfamiliar environments and stuff like that. And oftentimes it will fill in details.
Correct.
Oftentimes, we, like, say, for example, two people witness a robbery, and one of them, they say that the suspect was wearing a brown shirt. Another one, they say the suspect was wearing a red shirt. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things that depends on the individual. But, but the thing is, there was still, as far as we can tell, a robbery and a suspect. So the phenomena is happening. In some cases, how we interpret it or how we see it, that oftentimes is, it's very difficult to pin the details exactly, because oftentimes we have to rely on anecdotal evidence, which is very frustrating, because, a witness account, as good as it is, it's not physical proof. And it's just very, it's just very frustrating as far as the research and investigation goes.
I would say that in certain circumstances, in my background, we have training on how to recognize a robber, what things to look for, and how to remember certain details specifically, so that when you have to make a police report, you have that. And I've always thought applying that aspect of what I've learned to a cryptid encounter would be good. But at the same time, when it happens, sometimes you're not prepared and everything leaves your brain.
Yeah, well, that's one of the problems too, is that, we're not all on guard 24/7. I know that with there's a lot of credibility that's put up to civil servants and other people that are trained. And unfortunately, most of the sightings are by just regular lay people on their way to work. I mean, oftentimes a lot of the UFO encounters, people tell the stories, but they really don't report them. And then sometimes, they'll just forget about them altogether because, let's face it, oftentimes when we're out there, we're either on our way to work or we're like, we have to be somewhere else in a hurry. And when something weird presents itself, we're not always there to, capture all the evidence. I mean, everyone complains about, well, everybody has a phone on them. That's true. But when they're in the mix of it, very rarely do they think, oh, I got to pick out my phone and take a picture. And even when they do, these phones, they're great and stuff, but they're just not reliable for, say, long distance evidence gathering or when something is moving. It's very, very difficult.
Yeah, no, the phones are absolutely no good. It's really kind of a straw argument. I dare anybody to get out and just pull their phone out of their pocket and take a picture in 1 second.
Yeah,
let's see.
It's just a very difficult thing.
You honestly, you would have to have a decent digital camera that is a true digital camera, and you'd have to have your finger on it ready. And even then, you throw in things like autofocus and things like that, you're still not going to catch something that's within 2 or 3 seconds of an event, or maybe 5 seconds, especially when you throw in shock or disbelief or just plain confusion.
And that's why most of the paranormal pictures you see are blurry or just out of focus. It's because people don't have the time and they can't expend the effort.
Well, it's like Chris said. People, and also you don't have, people's minds will put a face onto an object that they're not necessarily recognizing. Our brains are wired to recognize faces.
Pareidoia.
This pareidoia and everything else. There's a lot of times. I mean, there's a reason why in the Bigfoot community, at least, there's something called a stump squatch or a blob squatch. And these things sometimes happen. Not all of them. I've seen some things that, I have to admit, they're probably blob squatches, but I think there might have been something in them. And then I think there are other ones that, oh, no, that's just got to be light, a trick of the light or the shadows or something like that.
Speaking of shadows, Chris, have you ever heard of any evidence with shadow people or black-eyed children? I mean, photographic or otherwise?
Off the top of my head, I don't know that black-eyed kids have been photographed, but it is certainly an intriguing phenomenon, and it's really difficult to talk about because it's one of those sort of personal things that, it just rubs people the wrong way. I remember one time I was discussing the topic, and it just has this, I guess, paranormal baggage with it as well. I was on Cisco Murdoch's Into the Gate paranormal show, and me and her, we were talking, and we were talking about the black-eyed kid phenomena. And as I'm talking about it, my smoke alarm just goes off right in the middle of the interview, and I pretty much have to stop and rip my smoke alarm out of the wall because it won't stop going off, and it didn't start until we started talking about black-eyed kids. And it's one of those weird things that like, this type of thing isn't supposed to happen, but it does. and it's just, it's one of those fascinating subjects out there that sort of brings this thing with it. Now, as far as photographs and stuff like that and evidence, I haven't seen or I don't know that there is convincing evidence out there. If it is, it hasn't come across my desk. I'm not saying that it's not out there, but as far as I'm off the top of my head, I'm not aware of it.
I'm not aware of it. I'm not aware of any either. I don't think I've ever seen a purported picture of a black-eyed child that wasn't a staged or obviously
That's what I was going to say.
thing.
I've mostly heard of encounter stories. I didn't know if there was anything more physical out there.
Yeah, and there is something to the effect of I guess public hysteria, which is sort of it's I guess people that are doing the research and stuff like that, it is frustrating because that will often cloud accounts where because of the internet and because of podcasting and all this stuff, and so many more people are interested in the paranormal, and they're out there writing books and taking accounts and doing stuff. And oftentimes, like we would have a lot of spillover and stuff like that. Oftentimes these encounters and stuff that were once, like there was times where we have Black Eyed Kids encounters that go back into the early 1900s. And at the time, people didn't know what to do with those stories because that label for that phenomenon was not at the forefront. And now it's this sort of, chicken and egg argument that we get into is, like, are we getting all these stories from hysteria, or has hysteria just shaken loose all these stories to come out of the woodwork type of thing? Mm-hmm. Sort of a chicken and egg argument.
It is.
Yeah, and we often see this I guess some like to call it a cyclical thing where it's like before this is popular and now this next new phenomena, that's the new popular thing, and it often comes and goes and ebbs and flows, and it's interesting. And like I'll even admit I get swept up in the Black Eyed Kid account. And it's one of those things. It's a sort of almost macabre type of interesting subject, because it's the subject where, we have this sort of phenomena that very well could be a projection of something. And it's often had this sinister element attached to it. Most of the time, you very rarely ever hear of good guy Black Eyed Kid stories. They're all often negative affected stories, and it's wrapped up in the sort of child facade, which is society. We are pretty much pre-programmed to be protective and to think well of children, because what happens in any political argument is what about the children, this and that, and that often it twists our psyche, and it's a very hard subject and a very difficult, emotionally difficult subject to deal with and confront and to talk about.
I'm going to say it has a lot to do with your own experiences and lifestyle. For example, like the Black Eyed Kids, I got attached to the subject because I randomly heard an encounter that happened in Abilene here where we live. And so it kind of gave me the creeps, thinking, that happened here? I need to learn more about this. Mm-hmm. And down the rabbit hole I went.
As far as creepiness factor, I guess I'll tell you guys a creepy story.
We'd love to hear it.
Well, it depends on your perspective. I met David Weatherly at an event, and he is sort of one of the more prominent Black Eyed Kid encounter people. And I was talking to him about this Black Eyed Kid account, these Black Eyed Kid phenomena. I was just, we were just shooting the poop, and I presented him this hypothetical, because again, I'm a bit of a goofball and somewhat of a provocateur of sorts. I mean, I do a lot of dark humor and all this stuff, and I presented him this hypothetical of, I said, okay, there's a Black Eyed Kid knocking on the door of a sexual predator. Who is in the greater peril? And of course, he of course, stroked his beard, and of course, he immediately, went into the like, well, I have no sympathy for sexual predators and stuff like that. Which is, that wasn't the question, but it's sort of a thing where we have these psychological attachments to things where we need to immediately because it's a very difficult subject to talk about, and in the news, like with the Epsteins and stuff like this, and hearing about all these children being trafficked out there, and it's just it weighs on us, and that's not, and it's and we react viscerally to it because, well, deep down we're all good people, or at least most of us, we try so hard to be good people, and it's just a very difficult and very taboo subject to talk about. And he, and then, I guess once he, was able to to shrug it off somewhat, because I didn't ask him, to have empathy for pedophiles. It was more of a, it was just a playful hypothetical. It was probably a bit too dark and creepy that I was presenting it, but it's just one of those things along where I would have to say is, afterwards we were able to joke about it and say like, well, if the Black Eyed Kids are going after pedophiles, I'll be happy to give them a list of the downloads. We can like download all the pedophile database and say, hey, kids, here you go. Here's a list. Go knock on their doors type of thing. Yeah, we're able to make a joke about it later, but it's very, there's so much stigma culturally.
No, you're correct
society,
about that.
Which is attached to it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're entire. I mean, your question literally was the same as, okay, what's worse, Freddy versus Jason? Who's going to walk out? You're presenting two different monsters. Mm-hmm. And you're right that with the society and the way everything is, he instantly went to the, I'm not going to ever defend a pedophile kind of a thing or anything like that. And without even realizing it, I mean, he automatically did, which means he completely misunderstood that question. He had to come back and think about it and realize the implications because, you're really talking two completely different evil entities here. And you're right. And which one's more in trouble? I mean,
it was supposed to be a playful hypothetical.
Yeah.
But I guess because I come from a dark humor background, it's no big deal to me, but I understand that asking him such a question was probably putting him in a predicament that would make most reasonable people, very uncomfortable. And, it's, I don't blame him for reacting the way that he did. It's just kind of the effect that I have on people. I remember one time I was joking about this with Jeff Stewart, and he kind of nodded his head and agreed with me. Was that a lot of cryptozoologists and researchers they really don't have that sense of humor.
No, they don't.
Because and I understand where it's coming from because you want to be taken seriously. You want to keep onto your credibility and all that stuff. And I'm sort of coming from a goofball, fun perspective. In a sense, I'm sort of throwing that to the wayside because oftentimes whenever I would talk to other cryptozoologists, I would often put up, the playful hypothetical that would make them squeamish is I would say, because we all have heard of the hypothetical, the question of if you had a Bigfoot in your sights, would you shoot? Yes or no? And I sort of put an extension on that. And I would say, well, if I had a Bigfoot in my sights, I would shoot him. And then I would, take pull out the frying pan and grill and then cut off a thigh or a breast, cook him up and, and make a Bigfoot burger because I would have to do that on the grounds of I need to establish apex predator dominance over them to protect us as a species, to let them know that, no, we are top predator, not you. And the only way to do that, of course, is to, chomp on one, and of course, it's just a goofy off the wall hypothetical. But whenever I say this to any serious cryptozoologist, they just have the most horrid look on their face.
They do.
Like I just, dropped a baby in front of them. And
we have a very hard time getting into that subject ourselves.
We do. I'm going to admit it on the air. Maybe I'll end up deleting this out. I don't know. But I have never, ever understood the kill versus no kill argument. I have no idea why it is so prevalent.
Any scientific established species in the world today had to be killed at some point. For scientific study.
Well, there has to be some sort of a specimen.
That's what I'm saying.
Now, I'm not saying that we would take a specimen if we had it. I mean, it has to be done in a very specific, certain way and everything else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a procedure.
There is, yeah. But there, to me at least, there is a recognition of reality that at some point we have to have at the minimum, you have to have a blood sample or something like that.
Yeah.
That would have to be done. Yeah. And it seems like so many researchers out there have just, and I think it's more born out of frustration than anything else, they've just completely skipped that step and said, no, this is no longer necessary. We have enough proof. We've already established they're real. Now we're learning their behavior. We're working out on their language and their culture that they have. I mean, we're getting into wood structures and things like that. And I've always sat there and just thought, if you were to the point where you could actually do that and validate it, physically proven the animal was real, if nothing else, by photographic evidence.
I find it intriguing that there are so many stories out there in ufology of this creature was found, that creature was found, and well, the government covered it up. It was found, there was a body, people saw it, and nothing went further from there.
That is something I'll say also, that when I left Sasquatch research back around 2002, when Sasha was sick after we'd moved, there was no government cover-up theory going on. Not at that time. When I got back in about 2015, I started getting back into Sasquatch. That's when I fell down that rabbit hole about the government cover-up area, and things like that.
It was a little. You got back about maybe 13.
I was thinking
you want to
15.
say 15? I think it was.
Oh well. Anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's the change of that, and I don't want to talk about this a whole lot because this is Chris's interview, but
I do have something to say on that. The cover-up angle is a bit of a double-edged sword in that it gives the lack of evidence. It gives us an out to explain the lack of evidence in a way that sort of, that gives credence to people saying, well, this is why we haven't been able to find a species or a specimen or any of that of any further evidence, because the man is keeping us down. But there are, accounts of people, like yourself saying, of people being harassed out there, which does add validity to the account that, well, maybe there could be something to cover up. Now, does it lead to that specific conclusion? We don't know. That's the thing where we sort of need to look into it and gather more evidence on.
Yes, sir.
I have been hearing now in the alien abduction phenomena, the idea of, the man, the government being in on it has been around for years, for decades.
Yeah, that's very old.
I'm just now listening through your shows and other Bigfoot shows, hearing about, the Bigfoot version of they have their own Men in Black, and the Men in Black phenomenon itself is a very intriguing, it's a very intriguing and thought provoking phenomenon that I also, really, really am enamored by.
That's interesting. That's very interesting. See, to me, I can trace the whole government theory, at least in Bigfoot. I think the earliest I've heard reference of things and actually hearing people talking about it was maybe around 2011, 2012. And if it hadn't been for my own experiences, I have absolutely no trouble saying I'd still think all those people were nuts. However, because of what I've had, I've got to give them at least a pause. I got to say, okay, I can see something. I do think that people are too quick to assume cover-up. I think that they can confuse cover-up with bureaucracy. Government and government entities are not the most efficient things in the world. And anybody who's ever dealt with, even if you've just dealt with the postal regulations trying to mail something, you will walk out of the post office thinking there's conspiracy against whatever you're trying to mail. You
get frustrated.
And you get frustrated. It's the nature of bureaucracy, and our government's just gotten to the point where it's that large. And so I tend to want to give a lot of credit, or not credit, but tendency that I think that's a large part. But then, just as you were saying before, where you get the social hysteria and everything else, where essentially people, they'll hear a story and they'll run with it. And next thing you know, because we have to admit, there is an unscrupulous element out there. There are people who only want attention. or it's at least a
Or an
major
agenda.
part of what it's an agenda or something.
Yeah.
And we have to admit, now with the way the internet is, wanting the attention is money. If you're willing to say the outlandish, if you're willing to promote those theories, there is a large group of people that are drawn to that. They want to hear that. And it all really boils down to, you know what? It gets you more clicks. It gets you more views. It gets you more Patreon members and support. It's the truth.
Yeah. And if I can add on to that,
go ahead.
Bureaucracy frustration, incompetence is the breeding ground of conspiracy. I've heard that said. And, it's just what could be just bureaucratical nonsense and stuff, very well is fertile ground for conspiracy. And it's sort of like a self-feeding, self-fulfilling premonition. And as far as people, because oftentimes I'll hear that sort of, as far as people seeking attention, like even the most prominent and well-respected researchers will say, well, what do these people have to gain? What do these people they have so much to lose. And yet the person they're referring to is appearing on a network television show, doing this and that. And it's sort of I guess I can understand the argument of someone trying to protect the validity of the case they're trying to make. But at the same time, it is sort of, again, another double-edged sword where we have this account or we have this situation of, giving the people attention at the same time, bringing up a case or a certain story that is a very prominent case that does open the doors for people taking a look at it and say, well, that's a very good case. That'll make me think more about that. Like, say, for example, Travis Walton. Travis Walton his case is a lot of people say, well, he hasn't changed his story. He passed various lie detector tests. And of course, looking back, those lie detector tests, looking at them now through the modern lens, they probably weren't the best means of dictating, honesty or not really honesty, but it's not concrete. It doesn't prevent concrete evidence. But at the time, it was all that they had. And, I've met Travis Walton and I've spoken to him. He's a very, very good, very awesome individual. And I believe that he believes what happened to him. And he, he's a very grounded, common sense, sensible guy, and he's one of those people that you want to believe. But again, his case and stuff, it's sort of a paramount case where, if you need an example to start people off, he's one of the foundations of the abduction phenomena, as is people like Whitley Strieber and various other people. I can totally understand why some people would get the impression that, oh, these people just want attention. And in some cases that's true, but in other cases it's totally acceptable or not acceptable, but understandable that someone could have a remarkable thing happen to them. And then they're thrust into this world where, it's like, oh, you have this one thing happen to you, but you're getting so much attention, and people want more. So, and you don't want to disappoint them, but at the same time, it's like, is it really lying? Well, maybe there's something I didn't remember that I could maybe add on. And, the idea that people have, nothing to lose and stuff like that, public ridicule is becoming a more and more, common thing in our culture, like with the cancel culture and the call out culture on the social medias and stuff, which is just a big old cesspool. So as far as, the thing is, now everyone has something to lose for everything. It doesn't matter what it is. So as far as, and in some cases, maybe the benefits outweigh the risks, because I would have to say is that the, because people do write books now. It's like, you don't need to go to these big publishers. You don't need to go to the establishment
Just go to Amazon.
produce. Yeah, to produce your own content. Everyone can have a book now, and I'm not saying that means they have something to gain. Well, it's just another means of telling their story, and you got to face it. I mean, we on podcasts and stuff, we like talking to fascinating people, and just because they've been on all these shows and stuff, does that should we be critical or more suspicious of them? It's like, well, I mean, that's a very hard thing to say, but at the same time, maybe because their stories are so good is why they are so sought after, and it's that sort of, again, I keep bringing up the double-edged sword where we want to hear more. We're hungry for it. So trying to suck more out of people who have the slightest experiences, that's just the reality of the society that we live in. That's just how the social construct is. And, and it's whenever I hear people do that whole, like no one has something to gain, I find it kind of like, it's a cop out. It's a cop out. Like the government came and stole my Bigfoot body and stuff like that.
You're definitely right about that.
Well, Chris, can you please share with us your experiences in the paranormal realm? Do you have any interesting stories or events that have occurred you'd like to share with us?
I want to interrupt that question.
Okay.
Just for a second.
Fair enough.
Just for a second. You interrupted one of mine earlier, so it's fair.
Yes.
I'm going to put a caveat on that. And before you answer that one, I want to know, have you or do you ever go out and do any cryptid research? Do you go out in the woods? Do you drive up and down roads? Or are you more the stay at home and talk to people type?
Yeah, I guess the field researcher versus armchair quarterback guy.
I was trying not to put it that way, but
no,
yes.
But that's what it is. That's what it is. I prefer to talk to people. I prefer to get their stories. I'd rather they go out there and get all the bruises and get in the face of the monsters and stuff, and then they come and tell me about it. I mean, it's not that I wouldn't do it myself. It's just, I just unfortunately don't have the time or the resources to do that. There were some times, like before I got into podcasting and that stuff, I would go out on ghost hunts. And the thing about San Antonio is we are a haunted central. We have so many, all of our hotels are haunted, everything from the Menger to the Emily Morgan to the this to the that. We have so many legends. We have the Lechusa, the Donkey Lady, this, that, and the other thing. We have the man, the devil on the dance floor and all this stuff. We have such rich cultural, everything paranormal. We are horror central. It is that's just the place that we live in. And I have gone ghost hunting, and it's one of those things where when it comes to ghost hunting and stuff like that, it's not really something that is it's not my forte, unfortunately, but I don't knock it. And I really don't knock the people who do it. It's just not for me. As far as cryptid research, I would probably be fascinated by it, but I myself am not a hardy person, because I would be, doped up on Benadryl and stuff like that. And, I mean, which would make me perfect fodder, because if a dog man ate me, all the Benadryl in my system would completely knock him out. And then we'd catch one live for once. But it's a sort of thing where, I'm more comfortable, hearing people's stories. And that's primarily what I want, is to hear people's stories. I'm not out to prove anything. I'm not out to make a difference, so to speak, in the paranormal field. I have no interest in doing all that stuff. I mean, if I walked outside and I tripped over a gray, I would totally, take him to the newspaper and say, hey, check this out. But it's just, I really don't see myself putting myself into those situations, which is, even though what little experience I've had is, like, hey, this is good enough for me.
You're more of a conduit for other people to express their experiences with.
I guess this means that I don't need to extend an invitation for you to go out sometime in the woods with us, do you?
No, I'll be at whatever the base camp is, and I'll just wait for you guys to come back. I mean, I mean, I would probably still go, but I'm not going to get in the thick of it. I'll wait for you guys to come back. When you go missing, I'll be the first one to call the police.
All right. Fair enough. You mentioned that you had gone out on some ghost hunts, anything like that. Do you have any interesting stories?
From the ghost hunts, unfortunately, no. But from my own, just living, that's where the interesting stuff comes. I think early in my childhood, oftentimes kids have this sort of thing where they go through this phenomenal stage when they're entering, I guess, sort of the rite of passage. It's called where they are poltergeist agents, so to speak, where they can become lightning rods for a paranormal phenomenon, and it just sucks into them. Oftentimes, these kids that go through this are usually they're loners and stuff like that, and they don't have any friends and stuff like that. I, on the other hand, I had a couple friends, and I had my artwork to channel whatever it is, but apparently I would still encounter, not big, no spinning heads or super monsters or bleeding walls, but I guess I don't even know if I would call it poltergeist phenomena, but the phenomena that I would encounter would be, I would be in my room, I would be drawing or playing video games or, doing all the stuff that I'm supposed to be doing homework. And I would hear my mom's voice calling for help. And it wasn't like she was calling for help, like, blood curdling, someone's coming in to kill her. It was more like a call for help, like my mom needs help, reaching the top shelf for a can of beans or something like that. Mm-hmm. It was sort of like a call for help like that. And I would often, go out into the kitchen or the living room or wherever I would hurt her, and there would be nobody. And then when I would run into her again, I said, or I would run into her and I said, Mom, what do you need? And she's like, I didn't call you. And I said, but I heard, and her cover for it was, oh, that's your angel talking. That's your guardian angel. One time I was in my room drawing, and my mother was out in the garden in the backyard. We have a sliding glass door. All of our windows are nailed shut, because it's not the best neighborhood, but that's just how the neighborhood is. All of our doors and windows that aren't supposed to open are nailed shut. And the only way to get back and forth into the backyard is that sliding glass door. And it's very loud and obnoxious because, we never oil it or whatever. Now I'm in my room. I hear my mom call for me. And then I go out into the living room to find her, and there's nobody there. And then I go out and I open the sliding glass door. It makes this loud, obnoxious creaking noise as I open it, stick my head out the window and say, Hey, Mom, you need something? And she's like, No, I don't need anything. And she goes back to work. And the thing is, looking back at it now, there was, from what I can remember, there was no way for my mother to trick me. There was no way for me to hear her, even if it was like, if I was to hear her through the wall, it's just, the walls are paper thin, but she's outside in the yard and I'm like 2 rooms in my own room. There's no way that I would have heard her. There's no way that sound would have had to travel like that. It's just, I keep racking my brain as far as to how I would have heard her. And that was just one of those things that's just, it perplexes me. And then there was another account where this was a secondhand story from my mother. And she had said that me and my brother, when we were much younger, I think I was 4, my brother was 8. And we were sleeping in the same room, and we were sleeping in the room. She had gotten up to get some water or something. And outside of our door, she had seen a glowing figure. She had just seen it from the knees up. It was just indistinguishable, just a glowing figure. And she really couldn't describe it because, it's not something she expected to run into. And then when she jumped in reaction to seeing it, it disappeared. And as far as she can tell us, that was, she of course goes to, well, that's our guardian angel. Any type of paranormal phenomenon that happened in our house was, quote unquote, our guardian angel. That's what we were brought up on.
Mm.
Yeah, I have had instances of sleep paralysis, and I have had sleep paralysis, bedroom intruders. But this is where I guess it sort of gets into goofy territory again. When I would research, do the research, for the alien abduction phenomenon and all that stuff. So I knew all that stuff. I knew what sleep paralysis was. And oftentimes in my later, younger adult years, I would get, I would have sleep paralysis episodes, and I'm able to work myself out of it very easily. There was a few times where I would have these sleep paralysis hallucination or entities that would come into my room, and instead of the shadow people or the grays or any type of monster, instead what I would get is I would get white trash, just hillbilly looking type of people would come in, and they would rummage through my things. And this is weird. They would open closets on walls that there were no closets. I don't know how to explain that. Like they would open a closet or a door where there was no door, and just go through my things, and they would look to me, just to make sure that I wasn't moving, and then they would go back, and then eventually they would disappear. And that happened like 2 or 3 times. When I was talking to Chris James and I told him this story, he said, "It sounds like you're haunted by the people of Walmart."
Let me ask you, because I find that fascinating. I mean, I'm sitting here wondering. You were saying Chris thought you were haunted by Walmart. Now I'm sitting here going, what is that stupid movie? Not Remembrance, but now it's gonna bug me. I'm gonna have to edit through this. What's the one with the banjo players, and it's got Burt Reynolds in it? And
Deliverance.
Deliverance. Thank you. Yeah.
Deliverance.
So,
yeah.
so to me, it almost sounds like you were haunted by Deliverance. And,
somewhat.
Now, in all seriousness, when you think back about these entities that were coming into your room, I'm assuming they're normal-sized human beings. Am I correct?
Well, yeah, I would guess so. They're, they're kind of misshapen in the sense that poor genes would misshape you. But it's sort of like there's nothing out of the ordinary that I would say, other than an ill-fitting shirt or something like that.
So these wouldn't be like we were going back to how the brain tends to fill gaps in to make sense. Okay, and actually the idea of seeing people like that in a room and everything else, my gut instinct, first thing I was thinking is, well, these are like normal-sized garden gnomes, maybe, because I'm imagining bearded figures and things like that. Did they have beards, things like this, or no?
More like mullets and Fu Manchus type of thing.
Oh my goodness!
And I would have to say, as far as from what I can remember of these entities, there was nothing. They would rummage through my things, and then they would leave. And then when I would get up and I would go through my things, nothing was missing. One time
they be disturbed?
No. I think it was all a hallucination on my part. It was. I guess it would be a livid dream.
A lucid dream.
Did the phenomena ever acknowledge you? Look at you?
Yeah, it would look at me to make sure that I didn't get up, and as they were, going about their business. But I would get up and I would check all my locks. I would check my alarms. I would check my windows. I would check my doors, and nothing was disturbed. Nothing was bypassed. There was absolutely no way for my bedroom or even my home to be invaded without me knowing, or without some type of safeguard being bypassed. So what happened was, technically impossible.
Was this terrifying?
Yeah, it was terrifying.
I mean, and I guess what I'm wondering is, could these people literally be an embodiment of something that you feared?
Well,
Or representative of it?
I guess I always have a fear of turning into white trash, but it's just, I think everybody's afraid of that. But it's more of my initial fear came from not being able to move. And in a sense, but the thing is, I completely understand what sleep paralysis is. So I was physically at a disadvantage, but when you're in that situation, you still feel the flood of emotions.
Right. See, I'm sorry. I'm just absolutely fascinated at your description. I've never heard of someone recount whether it was a hallucination or if they think it was a real being or whatever. I myself have never heard of a description similar to the way you'd put it. And so you got to pardon me. I'm wanting to dig down into that a little bit, I guess. And because I just think it's fascinating. And that's, on a personal note on my own, I don't think I've ever had an experience like that. But I'll personally tell you that my absolute most terrifying boogeyman is a gray at the end of my bed.
Yeah,
So the whole idea of something coming in at night, having the sleep paralysis, things like that, that just utterly that scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah, when I was growing up, I didn't have to worry about that. When we get to the what's under my bed, I'll tell you exactly why. But
fair enough.
There was no. I would do lots of heavy research into the gray phenomenon, and as far as how to counter sleep paralysis and stuff like that. So even though those sessions would happen, they were very short sessions because I would then quickly counter myself out of it. Because there is this trick where if you're ever in the sleep paralysis state where you are frozen and you can only move your eyes, the trick is to focus all of your energy, to focus all your will and everything into one of your fingers or a toe and just start moving and wiggling your finger. And then from then on, I guess the synapses in your brain will reattach or whatever, and you'll reconnect with your body. That is the common go-to method that I would use that would work for me. But I think oftentimes sleep paralysis is usually a side effect of stressful living and stuff like that. Oftentimes, if you just give yourself enough sleep and just take enough time for some self-care and stuff like that, usually that kind of thing it can be avoided.
Mm-hmm. I've heard of that method, but thankfully I've never had to try to employ it because I think I'd fail.
Yeah.
Now, I would like to change the topic a little bit and get a little bit on the lighter side. Are you ready for the quick cryptid query?
Yep. I was born ready.
All right. So the quick cryptid connection query is a quiz of cryptid names that we have compiled together, and the guest, you, Chris, will say yay if you believe it, nay if you do not believe in it, or have never heard of it. Say what if you have never heard of it and it sounds like a totally made up name. Does that sound like fun?
Yep, that sure does.
Okay, within this quiz, we have 2 Easter eggs. We have the former known cryptid, now proven real creature. Mm-hmm. And we have a cousin of Bigfoot.
Yeah, an international cousin.
An international cousin, possibly. It might be Native American. It might, different names of the Bigfoot creature.
Now, yep. I again want to say for the record, everybody lets me down on this, but there are extra points for how creatively you can say what. Someday I'm going to get someone, a guest on here that will be obnoxious with their say whats. It's a goal of mine. All right, y'all continue.
All right, so moving on. Let's start with the Thunderbird.
Yay.
Hibagon.
Say what?
Morag.
Say what?
Tornet.
Say what?
Woodwoes.
Yay, I think I've heard of those.
La Lorena.
Ooh, yeah, definitely yay.
Bosnia Beast.
Ooh. Yeah, I think I've definitely heard of that one.
Zifrus.
Yeah, I think I have heard of that one. I believe I know what that is.
Popo Bawa.
I'm going to say, I'll go out on a limb and say maybe that's the Bigfoot cousin. I'll just throw that guess out there. We'll get to that. But I'll put down yay.
Hoan Kiem.
Say what? Don't think I've come across that.
San Clemente Monster.
Say what?
Phoenix.
Ooh, yay. Definitely yay on that one.
Pukwudgie.
Oh, yay. Definitely yay.
Warrakin.
Oh, yay.
Shunka.
Yay.
All right, that's all I had. Now, you guessed the...
It's either the Pukwudgie or the Popo Wopo. Whatever.
Popo Bawa.
Yeah, one of those guys.
The Bigfoot cousin, actually, in this list, is the Woodwoes.
Oh.
It's a lesser-known, out-of-use name for Bigfoot, and it's originated in Europe. Do you have any idea as to what the former cryptid, now proven known creature is?
Could you read them back to me real quick?
Sure. Thunderbird, Hibagon, Morag, Tornet, Woodwoes, La Lorena, Bosnia Beast, Zifrus, Popo Bawa, Hoan Kiem, San Clemente Monster, Phoenix, Pukwudgie, Warrakin, and Shunka.
It's very hard to pick it out of that list. I really don't know.
It's the Hoan Kiem. It's actually a turtle. It is originated from Vietnamese mythology. But in March 24, 1998, scientists videotaped the creature and actually were able to catch several live samples to document it. So it's just a very odd-looking turtle.
Yeah. The Eastern lore, as far as their monsters and stuff, is truly fascinating. They've got some quite unique creatures.
Yeah, I tried to get it international. This quiz, I love to dig into some of their mythology and their cryptid creatures because I do find it fascinating as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Don't let her lie. She just likes to torture our guests.
Thank you for taking the quiz, Chris.
No, I do like hearing some of the more international stuff like the Kelpie and stuff like that and the Karen and all that, stuff that I've studied. Of course, all the stuff that I've studied, none of that came on this list by chance. Which means I have to do more studying.
Hey, that's a fact of life with all of us. We all have more to learn. We all have more to learn.
Definitely.
So tell me, where do you see yourself going with the podcast and with your paranormal and varied interest in general?
Well, I hope to keep it going. As for, I don't expect it to be overwhelming. It's mostly, I try to keep it, it's mostly a personal project because it's a very varied type of show. Yeah, it does have paranormal, but it's also a bit of an outlet for me to, to goof off every now and then because there are pretty much like the 3 show topics that I have is I'll have the paranormal vein where I get to do all my serious business and talk to fascinating people and all that stuff. And then I have the fandom vein where I get to, gush about, stuff that interests me, like comic books and all that type of things. And then there's the vein of the hot topics where basically I just get to blow off steam and talk about the news items that ticked me off and all the controversial political stuff out there that's just absolute nonsense that I get into, and that's more of where I allow myself to have my dark humor outlet. And those are episodes that are, strictly explicit. And I try to put as many warnings as I can on there that they're not, as far as the whole dark humor of, like who's in the greater danger between a sexual predator and a black-eyed kid. It's sort of that vein of very dark, offensive humor that there, because, like I said, in my podcast background, I am an avid fan of dark comedy. A lot of the names of the podcasts that I listen, I don't think I can say on this show unless you'd have to bleep them out. But I just love obscene comedy. And it's every now and then it's refreshing to have a personal outlet for that. So as far as this, I really don't expect it to be more than just my little personal project where I get to get together and have my fun. But when I do the interviews, I treat my guests with respect. I try to come to an understanding. I'll often speak to people that I don't necessarily agree with, but I want to come to their understanding of the phenomena and allow them to explain themselves, and at the same time provide, scrutiny, in a respectable fashion. I think in one of my past shows, I had a flat earther, and I'm a sphere boy, but I do feel that there are some, there is some good questions on the flat earth side that I don't think get, respect or good enough answers. And we were able to go back and forth. Now, there were some instances where I think we talked over each other, but it was, for me, a pleasant, experience. And even, afterwards, the guest, he said, he really liked how coming onto my show and not getting badgered or berated or put on the spot like he would like other outlets. And that was a nice thing to hear.
Mm-hmm.
I can understand that.
Yeah.
I actually, believe it or not, I try to do that on our show. Because not all of our guests do I agree with and everything else, but I try to give them still the equal.
It's an open forum.
Yeah, the equal forum and the equal footing.
Before I got into podcasting, I was pretty much the closest thing to a professional troll. So I know how to get into a fight and how to start a fight. So when it comes to having that conversation and offering someone maybe a cross-examination or offering them some criticism, I think I do understand that you want to come at it from a sensible point to where you're not talking down to the guest, where you get to
Correct.
say, like oftentimes when I talk to the flat earther, I would say, I wouldn't say, you're wrong. Instead, I would say, well, the criticism for this theory is, and then I would present whatever the evidence or counter evidence or counter argument is. And it's just that maintaining that level of cordialness is a bit of a feat, and it does take practice, but it does pay off. Volumes would, because, because we're not here to get into a fight. We're not here to prove each other's right or wrong on the spot. I try to go for more, when I talk to my guests, conversational rather than debate, because I've been in enough debates, and we've got, I think with the current, social media climate, debates have become, a juxtaposition of what they really were. No one knows how to properly debate anymore. All they know is how to copy link pasta and Google foo each other and try to shut each other down rather than actually have a conversation. And, and it's funny to hear this coming from me. If you listen to some of my Hot Topic shows, that I come from a background of just egregious humor, obnoxious jokes, and, just you know, like I'm not afraid to get dirty, but when it comes to, you know, having that conversation, there is a time and place. And when we're discussing, you know, these topics and stuff, unless it's been established that, yeah, we can go there, it does take a bit to ensure that we don't when it's not expected.
Hey, the worst thing in the world that ever happened for people to actually communicate and understand each other was texting and typing. The utter loss of hearing tone,
voice intonation,
everything is just, you're right. It's so easy on social media or something like that for people to take it the wrong way or to think you're doing something, because you can't. It's very difficult. I mean, there's a reason we have emojis now and this and that, because they're all sorely trying to put that tone back into it. And you're right. All civility is lost. People just now assume the worst of what you say. Or conversely, people go out of their way to make sure that they don't assume, in which case it still goes out badly sometimes, because you'll have someone who actually is attacking, and these people will be like, well, they didn't mean it, you know, or something like that. I mean, both are actually pretty evil in its own right. And I think it's something where our technology and our culture now today has really just kind of let us down. We have not adapted well to it.
And people, I think, are confusing counter arguments with personal attacks and misconstruing them. And that is a disservice on both sides of whatever it is that you stand on a topic.
You're correct about that. Let's not forget just outright misinformation that is placed out there, because people there's a lot of people that will put out purposefully misinformation, I think, or at least twist the information in many ways to try to get their point of view put across. And a lot of other people that are observing may not know or understand enough to realize that is actually happening. And that is another great ill, I think, that we're having out here and everything. And I don't know.
Yeah, that's pretty much a whole nother topic to get into that may be for another time. Yeah.
All right. You've hinted at it. You've gone to it. What the heck is it that's creeping you out under your bed?
Well, when I was a child, I was often afraid of course, you know, getting off the bed and arms coming out from underneath the bed and grabbing me. I always had that fear until I think when I was maybe 5 or 6, we got a dog. And as I grew up, I was very heavily into shows like Sightings, and I would go to the library and rent books on alien abduction and stuff like that. And that was sort of my bread and butter. I would tape, back then we didn't have, of course, like Netflix like we do now. Instead, I would have to watch the Sci-Fi Channel, tape a program off the Sci-Fi Channel, and often, you know, like abduction documentaries and stuff like that. And then I would watch them back on my VCR in my room and stuff. And I would just, you know, terrify myself with all this inundation of this culture. But, and of course, you know, but I would sleep soundly at night because I knew that whatever it was, it couldn't come and get me because I had a protector. I had a little black dog. His name was Odie. He was, I believe he was some form of Springer or English Spaniel. He had the long snout. He was completely black, totally black. And he would, you know, blend in with whatever darkness out there. The only way you could tell he was out there in the middle of the night is you would see 2 little golden dots floating around. And it's like, okay, those are his eyes. Yeah. and he would sleep at my, at my door. And I couldn't I would often grow up, and I would often, I would have to have the door closed, but because he was there, he would scratch at the door until I would open it, and then he would sleep in the doorway. Well, one day he was sleeping in the doorway, and of course he would snore. He would snore so loud that was the only way I would get to sleep, is if I could hear him snore. That was sort of, like my ASMR, so to speak. And my mother, again, gets up to get some water or something, and she's shambling through the door. She's like half awake. And my dog, he lifts his head up, and he lets out this low guttural growl, this ultimate defensive growl, to let him know that, like, hey, who goes there? And then my mom immediately just, don't growl at me, you damn dog. And then he just, puts his head down. It's like, okay, it's mom, false alarm. So whatever was out there that could come and get me, I didn't have to worry about, because he was there. Oh. And I had that sort of, I call him, I would refer to him as he was my Twilight Sentinel, so to speak, that I was safe. And that, I think when I was 21 years old, he lived for a long time, like maybe 15 years. And we eventually had to put him down because he got so old. But, from then on, that night after, I would look around in the corners and I would see these black swirls of where he was supposed to be. It's sort of like my mind playing, it was sort of trying to compensate for him not being there. And instead I would see a black swirl of clouds, sleeping in the corner of what was supposed to be him. And since then, I had many sleepless nights because I could hear the dead silence, and it took a while to get used to it. But now, because if there are ghosts and stuff like that, then I guess I ain't got to worry about it anymore. Because I figure he's probably still, on the ethereal plane, sleeping in my doorway, looking over me and protecting me and stuff like that. So with that, when it comes to ghost hunting and looking into paranormal accounts and all that stuff, it's like I still feel like I don't have to worry as much. Now I won't, like whenever I do read abduction literature, I make sure to read it just during the daytime and not at night, because otherwise I'm going to be up all night. But it's just, with that, I didn't have to worry about things under my bed or in my closet when I was young.
That's a sweet story.
I don't know if you had a very blessed childhood or if you got robbed and missed out of something that all the rest of us were terrified of. I just don't know. Now, I'll tell you this. I can't, specifically, Communion. I cannot watch Communion and sleep with the lights off. Even to this day, that the scene of that gray peeking out from, I think it was a chest of drawers or something like that in that movie, to this day, still utterly creeps the heck out of me. Jennifer's sitting up here laughing because she knows what I'm talking about. I have a nightlight when you can tell what, if I've been watching movies or reading or the wrong podcast comes on, my light comes on. I freely admit it.
I actually used Communion as a date movie. It didn't work because it was the first time I saw it and I got scared the crap out of it. So it kind of ruined the date.
That's funny.
So Communion is, if you haven't seen it, don't use Communion as a date movie because it's just the thing. You try to get the girl to get scared to get her in your arms and stuff like that. But in that one, I was scared and I was the one jumping in her arms, so that the dynamic didn't work.
Oh man!
I didn't get lucky that night.
Oh, that's a good story.
That is a good story. That is.
We really appreciate having you on here, Chris.
Yes, we do.
It's been very entertaining.
It's been very entertaining, very revealing. It's nice to get to know another podcaster that's moving in our community, and we appreciate you taking the time with us, buddy.
Yeah. I'll tell you this. whatever you do, do not get me and Chris James in the same room, because we will talk and talk and talk and talk until the cows come home, and then some, and then we'll talk to them, because we can go on. We can spin a yarn for oh my God. Don't even get me started.
Speaking of Chris James in the same room, are you going to be at any of the Bigfoot festivals coming up?
There's one. I think there's one coming up in middle of October, I believe so.
There is. That's the Texas Conference in Jefferson, and Chris is going to be there, and we plan on being too.
Yeah. I met him at the Edinburgh conference there, and the funny thing is, before I head out there, one of his podcasts, a link for his, I think he posted a link to one of his episodes where he interviewed Noe Torres, and they had talked about the incident at Edinburgh, and I had listened to that show on the way there. And then when I got there, it's like, oh my God, I have to meet this guy. I have to talk to him. And then, as soon as I went down there, I immediately hunted him down, and we spoke for 4 hours.
Yeah,
that
sounds like Chris.
and I bought one of his books, and since then we've been fast friends. I do enjoy him. It's just the cryptid community, the people that I've met so far within, even within Cryptid Connection, who are, it's funny that a lot of the people in the community, those that I already know, are such, remarkable characters, and they're such good, friendly people. And
yes, they are
such a good community. And I'm pretty sure that there are more people that I'm getting to meet, that I'm getting to know and building friendships with. So, it's just, I just don't know what to say about it. It's been overall a positive experience for me. And I'm more of into cryptids, but I'm not quite the Bigfoot guy, but I do respect the lore and the conversation. And I just find the whole thing fast. So as far as, Cryptid Connection, it's, I'm looking forward to, where it's going to be in 5 years.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that very much. I love hearing people think that we'll be around in 5 years.
Yes, that's our goal, but it's ever changing, ever growing.
Yeah.
Go ahead. If I could survive the 1 year, you guys should definitely survive the 5.
We've been around. Well, let's see here. Technically, I started stuff. Oh, the site went initially live back around February?
February.
I think it was.
Yeah.
And then we started the podcast June? No, it wasn't June. It was May. I think it was May. And with the exception of 1 week, we missed the 1 week because we'd gone out of town and everything else. We've been able to do the one show a week. And just by paying attention to everybody else, that seems like that's becoming more and more of a feat in its own right. And I'm really proud of that record. And our listenership is still growing. Our YouTube subscriptions, things like that, they're still growing. I mean, it's not a whole lot, but it's a little bit every week. Every day I'll get a couple of notifications.
Yeah, I keep telling him slow growth is good. Don't worry.
Yeah. The podcast is actually now starting to take off a lot more than I expected. I was really surprised. The podcast, at first wasn't getting a lot of love. It was all the YouTube. And now all of a sudden the podcast is starting to take over, and there's actually more growth going on the podcast side than there is the YouTube. And that's only been for the last 2 or 3 weeks. But I find that interesting. So, but anyway, I know I'm digressing and we're talking about stuff. We'll edit this probably out, dear. She's sitting there going, come on.
Yeah.
Anyway, but no, I really do. I appreciate the kind words. And it's a dream. It may or may not happen. We're going to branch out. Like I said at the beginning of the show, we've been focusing on cryptids, specifically with Bigfoot for the most part, because it was our own comfort zone. It's where we were at, or at least I was. Jennifer's a little bit more paranormal. on her own. She's more of a broad-minded. But Cryptid Connection is actually intended for all of those groups.
All
the
cryptids.
entire, all cryptid, all paranormal, and all the UFO. It itself, the dream is it's being agnostic. People can't, because Facebook, be perfectly honest, Facebook's all great and good. We can sit there and make fun of each other and get into fights and everything. But it's still just kind of public. There is no sense of belonging in the same way. And that's sort of what we're trying to generate, is that actual community that isn't there otherwise. And so,
No, and before we leave, can I bring up something real quick?
Yes, you
Absolutely.
Yeah, I do like art on the side, and I've been trying to push that I'm available for artistic recreations of counts and stuff like that, because I'm always fascinated by a lot of the stories and stuff that people bring forth. And I know that like a lot of people want artistic recreations, and I'm open for commissions for that. I've often gone to many prominent cryptozoologists and offered them freebies. And unfortunately, because they're so busy, they're unable to take me up on my offer. But if anyone out there is sort of looking for assistance with setting up an artistic recreation of an account or anything like that, I would be open and happy to assist with that.
What's the best way that we can post on our podcast show to reach you?
Yeah. Do you want us
an email?
Yeah. Well, how do you want?
Website?
How's the best way of getting hold of you?
Well, the show has an email at conspire a theory, all one word, at outlook.com. Okay. I can be reached at Facebook. I have a public or I have a profile on Facebook, but I don't use Facebook that often. I am also on Twitter. Just look up Conspire a Theory, the podcast. I think it's all one word. I'll just Conspire a Theory, at Twitter or whatever the Twitterverse is. But I do have to give people warning that, if follow me at your own risk, because I do go there. I am getting into, it is, Twitter itself is a cesspool. And I'm not afraid to get dirty in it. And I do that for fun. But if you need to reach me, and I'm there. I do get people coming to me and asking, questions and needing some guidance here and there. I am experiencing that sort of, sudden growth as well. I think I would have people come on and they would write me a letter and say, "Hey, I'm going to listen to your podcast." And I'm like, "What, are you threatening me?" Because I'm like, what is that supposed to mean? And then I have to calm down and say, oh, wait, they mean they're going to actually listen to the podcast. They're not going to, look for something to hold against me or something like that. It's like, it's just a threat. and it's a thing that, it's slowly growing. But, I am enjoying the growth so far.
We should let you go to bed, because I would love to go to bed myself.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and cut this right now and say our goodbyes again. And Jennifer, you start.
Thank you for a lovely evening, Chris. It was a pleasure and definitely an amusing time. We appreciate it.
It really was. It was very entertaining. It was very informative. I love how I could just get you started on a topic and you run off with it. You're there. You knew everything. You answered questions before I could even answer them or ask them.
I had them written down, and you already was going.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
You went right through, and it was just. I wish all guests were as good as this. This made our job very easy. And I want to appreciate that, really, because that means the editing's going to be easy.
Yeah. Yeah, if you ever want to get together and talk shop, I'm definitely open for that.
Definitely. Okay. Fair enough. Chris, you have a good night, sir.
All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. We'll talk to you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Guests of Cryptid Connection are all members of the Cryptid Connection website. Join the community, a safe, secure, and private place for all your paranormal and cryptid pursuits.
cowboy, he always misses when he's aiming at the target in his head. And every broken man finds his idle hands grasping at tomorrow's promised land. And I've been thinking about running, and I'll get out on the town just for myself. And that's when I saw her, and she looked right through me. And when I said I do that day, I really do. 'Cause every cowboy, he always misses his shot when he's aiming at the target in his head. And every broken man finds his idle hands grasping at tomorrow's promised land. And I've been thinking about riding, and when I get the first draft back with no red ink, but I've been thinking to do my best work. Yeah, I've gotta leave this town to find my way. And when that plane touched down on that island town, I knew that my life's work was in their hands. So I started digging wells of water, and I'm a hero in their eyes. It's clear to see. 'Cause every cowboy, he always misses his shot when he's aiming at the target in his head. And every broken man finds his idle hands grasping at tomorrow's promised land. And I've been thinking about the time that I have wasted sitting here. 'Cause I've been thinking that all this thinking is the thing that keeps me further from myself.
The music and soundtrack for the opening is from Epic Film Score by Alex Kaskin. The closing credits are Every Cowboy by Cellophane Sam.